Getting into the composer's mind, which is what I was doing for the last 9 years, really changed my playing dramatically.
Hello, this is Contrabajos Conversations. I am Jason Heath, and for the next 2 weeks, we are bringing you some of the greatest hits of the past couple of years, the new generation of Contrabajos Conversations, everything I've done since 2015. And I thought it would be great to start with this episode featuring Andrés Martín, who is truly one of the most exciting, dynamic, popular double bass composers in the world today. And what's so fun for me doing this podcast is how these online conversations sort of morph for me into real world experiences. And I have been so fortunate since I did this conversation with Andrés. And this was at the very end of 2015 or the very beginning of 2016. I can't remember, but going back, it's so fun to look through my old footage. I have video of me doing this. It's my old crappy apartment in Evanston, Illinois, when my wife had already moved out to San Francisco, and I was just there with the cats. I see the cats walking around in the background. Definitely a blast from the past, but I have had the chance to work with Andrés and get to know Andrés personally in many capacities. And actually, as I am putting this out, I am down in Tijuana, Mexico, where Andrés lives, and I am teaching at the Latin American Bass Camp. I'm expecting to get some great footage from this event, so stay tuned for more of that to come. And I really hope you enjoy this episode. These things can get kind of lost in the shuffle because there's so much content. It's such an exciting world we live in, this bass world. This was actually episode 196, and I believe that this is what I'm putting out here. This from the archives Andrés Martín episode is episode 419. So several hundred interviews in between. You very well may have not heard this in the past. He's such an exciting composer and musician and brilliant thinker. I really know you're going to enjoy this. And we've got some great sponsors for today's episode, About&n Bass and D'Addario Strings. More on them later. But let's dive into our conversation with Andrés Martín. Hey, thanks for doing this. You know, I got together with Jeremy Kurtz last week up in San Francisco, and he gave me a copy of your solo CDs. I've been checking that out, too. Cool. Yeah. Okay.
Well, he's a great friend.
Yeah. Well, he and Steve Tramontosi played that bass duo that you wrote, where Jeremy was saying you got stuck in the secondary detention at the border.
Yeah.
And we're writing.
Yeah, it was the only way to make it something important of that 2-hour waiting. Yeah, it was a time where my country was in the blacklist of the U.S.
Yeah.
So every other time I went across the border, they sent me to the secondary inspection, and basically it was just waiting for a couple hours until they finish interviewing those incredibly hard cases. And then they just asked me a couple questions, like 50 questions. And just let me go. I mean, it was at the end, it was nothing, just waiting. But, you know, if you go shopping with your family and they have to wait for 2 hours in the car, it's not fun.
Yeah.
So that time we were doing some duos. I was supposed to go to his home to rehearse, and, well, I arrived a little bit late.
That's so frustrating. Man.
Yeah, and the piece is frustrating. It's very complicated. I'm not sure why did I wrote something so hard. It never happened again, and I hope it never will. Yeah. But it's fun.
Yeah, this is going to be great. Hey, maybe I like to have people just talk a little about their early years on the bass, where they grew up, and it should be interesting to hear a little bit about that from you.
Well, I grew up in Buenos Aires. My father is a musician. He played the guitar. Well, he played trumpet, and during his youth years, he played guitar. He was a songwriter. But then he moved to classical music and start working in orchestras and doing some other gigs. So I started with the guitar pretty young, at 6. And then I went to school it was for adults. I was the only kid over there.
Oh, okay.
And I was 8. So it was basically a career in popular music playing, performing. So we had jazz and tango and blues. Anyway, I was there for 4 years, and then my father suggested I should take another instrument that won't direct me to poverty. So something that I could play in an orchestra. So I chose the bass, basically because I thought it would be easy, because it was pretty similar to guitar, but I didn't do anything. So I just did it for being okay with him.
Yeah.
So I kept playing my electric guitar. I was aspiring to be a rock star,
Nice.
like every kid. So anyway, I started with bass, having private lessons, and until one day my professor called me and said, I just signed you in for a competition for entering to a youth orchestra. I had no idea what that was, where that was. Just he told me, you just take your bass and go to the audition and play the last thing we had in our lesson. Actually, he lent me his bass, and I did it. I went in the youth orchestra, and the first rehearsal with 100 other people playing music was just remarkable. And that thing sort of started changing my life and my vision of the music, because before that I was only playing, rock. And somehow I was always frustrated because all my friends in the rock bands I had, music was just an excuse to be together,
Yeah.
And music for me was the principal motor of everything. So the orchestra sort of changed my vision, and I ended up leaving away the guitar.
So you started to get more serious about bass, and when did the composition enter the picture for you?
That is pretty recent.
Okay.
It was in 2004. The orchestra here hired a composer in residence. So he came, my professor, he came to live to this city and write only for the orchestra. And since I was in that moment, like I told you before, that I was struggling every time going across the border, I decided that I should take advantage of him living here and try to learn something. I always liked to write my own songs, but never attempted to be a composer or even dreamed about it. So I just knocked his door and I said, teach me something. I want to be a better musician,
Yeah.
So we started working, and he told me, I remember the first lesson, he tells me, I will make you write a symphony in 1 year. And I just laughed. And he did it. Actually, a year later, I wrote a symphony that was premiered with this orchestra where I work. And it was pretty amazing. I just never thought that it was happening. It was that kind of teachers that work with you and you don't feel it.
Yeah.
That feeling that you go and you do nothing and you always think, am I learning something? I don't feel like he's teaching me or he's making me do anything. But at the end, you realize you did everything with him under his guidance. It's that kind of a teacher. So it was pretty amazing. I mean, every lesson we had a conversation for about 2 hours about music, about life, and a little bit about the work I was doing. And I spent 6 years with him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he's a pretty famous arranger in Mexico. Also, he works for basically many popular musicians who wants to sing or do anything with the orchestra. He did it. And he has a pretty big resume, at least here in Mexico and in Spain. So the last 3 years I was with him, I started working for him. We made an arrangement where I was doing his arrangements and he was not charging me for the lessons. So it was pretty amazing because he always complained that he had no time to write original music because he had to do these arrangement gigs. So I proposed him, okay, let me help you with the arrangements so you have time to write, because I need my teacher to write music. So we did it like this, and it was amazing because he was supervising all my work, because it was his signature who was going in the score. So basically I was arranging for him for a few years, and after the last time we were sharing the signature, that was pretty amazing. So I got a pretty great chance to learn from him basically everything.
What a great experience to have somebody like that kind of mentorship.
Yeah, it was. He really took me like a son all those years, and I learned not only music, I learned a lot about life and about principles of music. I mean, having the composer's mind started to complete me as a performer, because it's now I see like three dimensions of the musician. I see basically there are two that are performer and creator, and there's a third one, which is the conductor mind. So I thought I should discover all these dimensions to complete myself as a musician, to become an artist, So getting into the composer's mind, which is what I was doing for the last 9 years, really changed my playing dramatically. And it changed my vision of the music and my role in this world as a musician. And right now I'm seriously considering I have to take the other path in order to really complete myself. So I see myself going into conducting world in the next years. I'm not in a hurry, but I do think it's the next step.
Oh, it's really interesting. You're talking about those three worlds. That's something that I've thought about a lot. And I haven't done a lot of composition. I've done some arranging, but I have done a lot of conducting. And like the last 5-6 years, I feel like I'm a totally different musician after spending all the time. It's a totally different view you start to take of the music.
Yeah, but if you are in the orchestra and you are sitting in the bass section and the mind of the conductor, you will be playing a lot better. And if you can understand the composer, it's like you have it all.
Yeah.
So any of the three spots you somehow, I think like you need that. I mean, a conductor who is a composer and understands pretty much the composition process and the mind of the composer, and who can really understand, because of his experience, how is to be a performer. I mean, you have to have the three of those. Yeah. I feel it. And as a composer too, I mean, you can write music, but if you don't understand how the performer will feel his hands and will feel the process of learning the piece, and you cannot do one without leaving the other stuff out. I don't know. It's something for me now. It takes a lot less time to understand a work every time I have to play it. Mm-hmm. The process of interpreting the music that has been written in the sheets, it goes lot faster than before, and I feel like I can connect much deeper with the work every time. It doesn't matter who wrote it, and it doesn't matter how he did it or what technique did he used. It's something that it allows me to connect much faster and much deeper with the work if I have to play it. And also it's a great tool, because as a player, performer, especially if you play bass. I think if you play violin, it's not a problem. But if you play bass, it looks like every project you want to do, it's really hard to find some good music. Mm-hmm. And if you want to start a project with another rare instrument, it's like you rely on that someone wrote some cool music for your project, and that is not very easy. So for me, it's a great tool because I feel like I can play anything, because if it doesn't exist, I can write it or I can arrange it. So if a friend comes and we have a chance to play with an orchestra, with a quartet, with any other bizarre formation, I can always write or adapt something for us. And that is a great tool, priceless, actually.
Well, it's got to be a really liberating feeling because, you look at the traditional bass repertoire and just the limits that are on that, and all of a sudden you can literally create anything for any situation.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a pretty amazing repertoire for the bass. I mean, you could spend your whole life playing that. I love most of it. Even the pieces that most people don't like, I like them. Mm-hmm. But it has a limit in terms of who you play with. Mm-hmm. I mean, in this city, I haven't found any great pianist partner. I mean, there are many great players, but none of them is interested in doing chamber music or chamber music with bass. So basically, if I want to play with someone in piano, I have to hire them, which is okay, but it's not the same when you have when you have someone because you pay them, and when you have someone who you can start a project with. You know, it's a different feeling, it's a different approach, and I'm more like the other side. You know, I want someone that, of course, I can pay, or we can share the profits when we play, but that will be a person who will be looking forward, rehearsing 2-3 times a week until the music really sounds good, you know, without pursuing the money. So I found a guitar player like this. And I rather play with him than playing with another person. So I had to write the music. There is barely nothing for guitar and bass, and it's an amazing combination.
It's a great combination. And I'm surprised that more people haven't done that. Another one that I love is harp and bass. My wife's a harp player, and so she and I have always been looking for music, and there is some, but I just love the timbre of that. And it's an instrument that doesn't cover up the bass necessarily the same way. Yeah.
Yes, it's amazing, and it has a huge range. Mm-hmm. Even they have a few low notes that we don't have.
Yeah.
Which is with this my envy always.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing. And also another amazing combination is harp and guitar.
Oh yeah.
That's like having a guitar orchestra. So those two can have lots of fun, and if you can play with both of them in a trio, it's just amazing.
I was watching one of the videos of you and Donovan Stokes. You were playing at 43, and I just love so. First of all, that's a great piece. I'd love to hear a little bit about it and just how you guys wrote it. But I love you had the whole orchestra of basses.
Yeah.
And then I think strings and percussion, if I remember right.
Yeah,
but
a few woodwinds.
Yeah, and some. But like, what an interesting set of timbres. It's really texturally just very interesting piece.
Well, it has that. The excuse is pretty simple. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a very small chamber orchestra with the correct proportion of bass section, according to me. So having 3 cellos and 43 bass players, it's about the right proportion that the orchestra should have. You know? So they are wondering if hiring more musicians, and I say, yeah, we should hire more bass players.
Exactly.
You can never have enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was a mix of a performance and a work. I don't know if you're familiar with the 43 missing persons case in Mexico.
Yeah.
Okay, so we wrote a piece that could relate with that story, and especially because when we started writing that, it just happened. And I wrote Donovan and said, we already had the project of writing a piece for the two of us with the orchestra. And I wrote him and I said, look, we are just starting. I believe we need a theme or something that can unite both of us, because the idea was to write something together. And since we weren't sharing the same pencil, even the same room, I thought we should have something in common. So a theme will be cool. And I said, look, this just happened in Mexico. I think it's pretty serious and people should be aware of this. So if you're okay with it, just, let's write about this. And he said yes, and we start working each other in their own world, and it became huge. I mean, I never thought that would be something so big in the moment. So anyway, we wrote this tree movement, and I was lucky enough to have 43 bass players in the bass camp, which was which matched exactly the number of the missing persons. So we did this theatrical ending where everyone went in front of stage and somehow asking for justice, So it was a very powerful moment, and I loved the result. I was pretty happy about it. And we were very lucky to have a full hall. We had like 1,000, around 1,000 people in the audience. So it was pretty amazing. For sure, one of my best experiences on stage.
Hello, modern day Jason again. And so cool to listen back to this. And I am at this event as you're listening to this. And what a cool experience, that Donovan Stokes Andrés collaboration. The show notes have links to this, so definitely check out that YouTube video of that performance. Very moving, dramatic, and he's such a great composer, Andrés. He's doing so many cool things. Definitely go through, subscribe to his YouTube channel, follow him on Facebook, stay connected with what he's doing. His piece was the piece that was played by Dominic Wagner, who won the Bradisich competition. And he wonderful player, obviously, but great selection, such an evocative piece, such a great orchestral piece, Andrés' Concerto. So go back and listen to that for sure. And I'd like to thank our sponsors for helping us keep the lights on here. The Upton Bass String Instrument Company. Upton has such a great journey. It's been so fun for me to follow along with them and what they've been up to through the years. They were a sponsor way back in the day on the blog, on the podcast, and it's great having Eric, Gary, the folks at Upton on board. And check out their car model Upton double bass. It is the only bass commercially made, endorsed by Gary Carr, and it combines comfort and tone. It's got a loyal following with jazz and roots players. Also, it's got a slim long car neck, and it's become a favorite of crossover electric players. And I've got a whole bunch of episodes coming up with some Upton artists. You're going to be hearing from Eric Rivas, who plays with Branford Marsalis. I just finished interviewing Kevin Smith, who is Willie Nelson's bassist. They both play Upton basses. So many great artists, past podcast guests, former students of mine play Upton basses. They are crushing it in the bass world. Online with their instruments. They're always evolving. So follow them, uptonbass.com. And thanks for sponsoring the podcast, guys. Great to have you back on board. And thank you also to our longtime sponsor, D'Addario Strings. I've got D'Addario strings on my bass. I recommend them to my students, my colleagues, people who email me for string recommendations. And if you haven't tried their Zyx strings, they are totally cool strings, especially if you play any sort of style that could use a gut sort of response. Zyx are the only synthetic core strings that D'Addario makes for basses currently, and they produce a warm, rich sound. And so you get the sound and the feel of gut strings, but more evenness, projection, and stability than real gut. I used them recently for a solo recital, totally loved them, and they're fantastic pizzicato strings, and they're great under the bow. And for me, the solo sound is just totally fascinating. So check them out. ContrabassConversations.com/strings will get you the information. And thanks for sponsoring, D'Addario. Really appreciate it. All right, back to this From the Archives conversation with one of our most exciting double bass performers and composers out there, Andrés Martín. So when you're writing, are you in front of a bass? Are you in front of a piano? What do you do most of the time, just in terms of the nuts and bolts of composing?
Well, I'm not an orthodox in anything I do.
Yeah, right.
So I'm still learning about the creative process, which in me, it's somehow a chaos. The only thing I know now, after a few years of doing it, is that my best moments happen in the morning when I'm still a little bit sleepy, a little bit awake. In that, I have my bass, I have my guitar, I have a piano, and I have a recorder. So sometimes I just play some of those instruments. Sometimes I sing, sometimes I tape myself, sometimes I go straight to the computer. I mean, I try everything I have in my mind, even tapping on the table, and anytime feels different. It looks like anytime I'm looking for something, I don't have any idea where it is. Sometimes I don't know where to look for. Some pieces took me months. Some pieces comes just in a recording session of a jamming. For instance, the elegy, the one I have on that same concert that is in YouTube. That piece was an accident. I was about to leave the house. I don't remember if I was going to have dinner or something. And I just walked across my studio with the lights off, and I felt something, and I grabbed my bass. And before playing the bass, the door of my home was open to the street already. And I just pressed rec on the iPad, and I recorded something. I started jamming for, maybe a half hour. I pressed stop and I left. And the next day, I sat down and listened to the recording, and I was amazed. I liked a lot what happened. And so it took me a few weeks to transcribe the parts I liked, but it's barely the whole piece. There are some minor modifications and restructure of the piece I cut from it. But somehow it came complete, an improvisation. So, all the times it took me a lot of time, backwards, and it's like every time it feels like I'm starting from zero, that I'm learning. And at the end, it's always the same thing. It's like an AC/DC recording, It's the same thing they've been doing for the last 30 years. Right. But somehow it feels new. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what they do. It always is going to be the same song. So I don't know. I just, a few years ago, I stopped trying to do something new and just trying to be honest and say, okay, this is what is coming out. Yeah. It might be good, it might be not good, but this is what's coming out. Because otherwise, I was under a lot of pressure before, always trying to do something magnificent, something new, something original. And sometimes the delay on time was due to acceptance of what I really liked. Sometimes I remember the second movement of my bass concerto, the first one, it's really silly music. Really silly music. And when I wrote it, I liked it, but I thought, this is just silly. It's stupid. It doesn't have anything, And it took me like 6 months to fully accept, okay, it's dumb, but I like it. So I could save lots of time if I was honest with me and said, okay, let's try something silly. I don't care if people think, okay, it's just one chord. Yeah, it's my song and it's just one chord. and it has nothing original on it, but I like it. I don't know. It's a constant learning. It's a complete different process to be a performer, because when you are a performer, you just prepare yourself, like training, and then you flow with the music at the very end of your process before playing. But it's a more mechanical approach in the term that you want to play something, you have to do an estimate of how much time it will take you to prepare for it.
Yeah.
So you practice enough, you prepare enough, you schedule yourself enough, and you will do it successfully. Okay? With this, at least the process of getting the material, you never know. It can came in one day, it can came in 1 month, but you have a deadline.
Yeah.
So that's the trick situation about it.
Well, that's a hard thing. You can't force creativity. If you're preparing for a recital or preparing for a performance, you can at least set out those hours, and you can say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. But yeah, that's interesting though. The mornings are a good time for you, huh? When you wake up. Yeah,
which is not good because I have a job during the morning. I have orchestra rehearsal, so I have to wake really early in order to be able to write a little bit before leaving. And that means I'll have something waiting for me when I come back. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's not good for the orchestra because I'm during rehearsal writing.
Sure.
And I have my notebook in the stand, and it's not that I'm trying to avoid my daily job, but I need to take those notes out. And sometimes I have to leave the rehearsal, go to the restroom, and keep writing for a little bit. But it's great. I mean, sometimes I feel bad because I feel like I don't have enough time to do it. And suddenly it's 8 p.m. and I feel, okay, I have all night long, but there's nothing in my brain.
Yeah, is it hard for you to switch back and forth? Like you're in that creative mode in the morning, and then you go to rehearsal. Do you feel like those are really different parts of your brain that you're using for those two different activities?
Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, it's hard because sometimes I feel like I should stay at home and keep. It hurts to cut the process, and I have to do it almost all the time. But at the same time, I think it keeps me fresh. Mm-hmm. Switching between different activities, it keeps me fresh. But sometimes I don't know, if I go to a rehearsal and we play some atonal music for 3 hours, I just come back and have to take a nap. I can write anything after that.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Even if the music is wonderful, my brain like reaches a level of confusion and but I don't know. It's pretty different. Yeah. And sometimes it's hard because I start missing doing one of the things. Last year, I wrote a lot of music. I remember 2013, I didn't wrote a single, in the whole year, I didn't wrote a single thing because I was too busy all year playing and traveling. And I start having that feeling that you have to take something out from you, So I miss it, spending time at home and writing. In 2014, I wrote a lot. I wrote like 2 hours of music between different projects, and I started missing playing.
Sure, I'll bet.
But it's good to miss something you like, It's a nice feeling because you always come back to that activity with eager of doing it,
It'll be interesting getting that conducting into the mix too.
Yeah, well, it's a long-term project. I'd like to do it. I had to do it a couple times with my music, and I liked the process, and I liked it because I felt I knew everything I wanted from the orchestra. Mm-hmm. And the other thing was that it made me think about how I write, because it made me start thinking while I was writing, okay, how can I express through the score more clear to the conductor what I want? because at the end the conductor is an interpreter too.
Right.
And when I write for the performer. Some things I write, and I know the performer is not going to play exactly as I have written that. I know he will get enthusiastic with this passage or no. I can somehow try to leave a room for him and writing the score, thinking about what the performer is going to imprint to the piece. So sometimes for what I want of the music, I'm not sure exactly what will be the best way of writing. So especially for the orchestra, because at the end, the interpreter of the orchestra is the conductor, are not the musicians of the orchestra.
Right.
Many things could be written in many different ways, especially the way you are going to conduct it.
Yeah.
So if you can take the score and conduct at your home and think you are playing the orchestra with your mind, I think the writing, it will arrive a little bit different.
In addition to all this composing, you've got this, and the performing, you've got this robust, strong bass program going on. Maybe just let folks know a little about your bass studio and about the November-December camp, just what you're doing in the world of teaching.
Well, when I came to this city, I remember I had only one student, and there were no other professional bass players around. In classical world, there was a few jazz players, and I just felt alone. I needed someone to talk about strings and bass music, and bass is, the usual hang.
Yeah.
And so I, little by little, I tried to basically make friends who like bass and wants to play, and it born like a bass club, basically. Mm-hmm. And little by little, it was growing, and now we have a nice environment. The music school grew a lot, and now there's a university like 100 kilometers south from here. So I have already a first generation who graduated, and some of them are around teaching, playing, and others travel. So now we are dealing with the second generation of bassists, and our community, it's still small but bigger than other places. Mm-hmm. We might be about 20 bass players around, and basically we do activities for us. So living so close to the border makes it easier for inviting friends, and it was not hard to get Jeremy here, for instance, as a good friend, and he will have to spend about a couple hours and coming here, teaching my students, and then having a dinner and coming back. And then I could do the same for him, and even playing. Getting together with other friends and play bass duos and doing it both sides of the border. The program now, it's working along with a community program that it's happening in Tijuana since 4 years ago, or about 5 years ago. So now I'm through my community, I'm helping or supporting the bass community of this program. Mm-hmm. This program is similar to El Sistema in Venezuela, but it's run by the federal government in Mexico City. So it has lots of orchestras from kids all around the country, and there's a big one here. So basically, what I'm doing, I have a studio with basses I've been buying in the last few years, and I have the studio filled with recordings and books, and I teach a couple days a week, and we have a few group lessons held by other of my students, bass ensembles, basically lots of activity. And we have a season of about 10 to 12 recitals per year.
Okay.
Bass recitals. So I provide them the pianist and the guidance and the music. So basically, every bass player around will be a part of this if they want. And I'm taking these bass players from the community program, which are kids that are about 12 to 15 years old. And I try to invite them to join the our bass community and do activity together. And some of them get inspired and wants to become a bass player, professional or not.
Yeah.
But that it's very comforting for us, and it makes us grow all the time. And through my organization, I can support some of them who wants to go to bass festivals, even the ISB convention, or if they need to audition in a school, I can help them to get the tickets so they can travel, or can organize a fake audition or recital, etc. Mm-hmm. And we also, in the past, I'm looking forward to reschedule that again. We were doing some concerts, bass ensembles in hospitals and jail, and taking the bass to the community.
Like this started to get going about 4 or 5 years ago, this program?
The community program started 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. My bass studio, because the community world is kind of making things harder to me right now. My bass group of students, that happened more than 10 years ago.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, so the thing was that when the community program started, they built a big music school, and I moved my studio inside there.
Okay.
So they have a music school with different kinds of careers, and I have my bass studio inside, but I have an autonomy. I can let my students to be a part of the music school, and every guy who goes to the music school can be a part of my bass studio. Okay. So it's like a sharing powers, to say it in somehow. Yeah. We're doing activities since 2004, and the bass camp started around that year too. And at the beginning, it was only for locals. And then I started opening the invitation for people from other places of Mexico, and it was growing every year. And I think I had pretty amazing teachers and performers here. Some of the best have visited us, which is a huge honor. You know, this city it has a pretty bad reputation for some things that actually happened here in the past, but it's one of the most interesting cities for being a worker of the culture. If you are in the arts world, this is pretty amazing. And I'm happy that things and artists are coming from different parts of the world and being around here all the time. And it looks like you can never get bored here. And bass-related, lots of things are happening. Unfortunately, we don't have the degree yet. So basically, the most of my work as a professor, it's being done with the basics. Mm-hmm. Because I have to prepare them to leave. And I'm looking forward we can have finally the accreditation so we can have all the degrees and attract more people. Because we're doing all of this, we have a season of, I can't remember now, but I believe it's 12 bass recitals we have between January and December. And we have an audience of 50, between 30 and 60 people every recital. They come to hear bass.
Wow.
And they like it, you know?
Yeah.
And we don't even have any remarkable soloists. It's just us. And people liked it anyway. So I can only imagine what could we do if we had more people playing in a higher level. It could be just amazing.
Yeah, that's great that you're getting that kind of turnout though for every one of those. That's fantastic.
Well, I think it's because people, and not only here. I think people, it's starting to realize how different it is to see a live performance, than a recording or YouTube. Mm-hmm. I mean, the experience is completely different. And if you as a performer are aware of it and take this advantage and really try to communicate with the audience, what you play is not secondary, but it's not the only important thing. So if the audience comes to see you and they know they will get an experience and you will be communicating with them, is what you play is just a medium for what you're doing, Yeah. So I think people is enjoying our performances, but they also come because they feel like they are part of it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I'm also pretty amazed that we always have a nice crowd for a bass recital, and people they know about bass already. And the other thing I would like to say that it was also an experiment I did last year. I'm teaching a Saturday course that works pretty much like a Tai Chi or yoga lesson. How has this happened? It's an open class for bass where you are not required to know anything about music to be a part of it. So basically, you can arrive, pick a bass, and join the group playing something. So it's a multi-level class, bass class, open to everyone, regardless their knowledge in music or bass. Yeah. So for my students, it works pretty amazing because I make them teach during the class. Some moments during the class. The class is an hour and a half long, so I take some moments of the class and I make them teach the person next to them. I don't know, maybe bow grip, or maybe a position for the left hand. And it's like, okay, now my students are going to teach the person next to you for 5-10 minutes, and then all together let's do another activity. So it's great because it makes them be aware of teaching. I can also spend a few moments with them to look their process for a second time during the week, especially with technical. And the other persons who can, because I was surprised how many people dreamed about playing the bass, but never were brave enough. I'm getting this comment more often and more often, like, yeah, I always liked bass, but I could never play one. Uh-huh. And I always wanted to try a bass for the first time, So this is the moment they can show up and finally grab a bass and play something. And you should see their faces, and they are just in heaven, and sharing the room with another bass players. So this created a very nice hang. And I must tell you that between these people, I had people 50-year-old people. I had other students of the school who plays other instruments playing bass. I had some violinists showing in disguise to play bass for a few minutes. And I earned a couple students from this.
Oh, wow.
And for audience, because all these people who comes to the workshop later, they come to the recital.
Yeah.
And they know that if they show up enough times, they might be playing with us in the next recital. So it creates a very nice vibe around bass, And this way it feels like, it's open. The bass community is open to everyone.
Yeah.
So this is one of the most nice experiments I've ever done regarding bass, and that I know I will do in any place I am. I know it seems crazy, but you can just show up and play bass.
Well, I love the idea because it hits it on all these different levels. Like you're getting all these people who might have wanted to do it, but are just haven't had the courage or and then you get a chance for your students to practice teaching, and then you get to see your students again. I mean, that's a win-win.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the hardest part is how can you have a multi-level class without getting people to get bored?
Yeah.
Because people who already play, well, if they've been playing for a couple of years and you are teaching bow grip, they might think, well, this is boring. I don't need this. So it's a challenge to make them understand it's good for them to always review the basics and how hard is to share it with someone who has no idea. And then I can put one or a few of them to teach while I get in the corner with the advanced guys and I give them 5 or 10 minutes of a private lesson going to exactly the point they needed in that particular moment. Yeah. So I had a crew, it's not every Saturday the same, but it's around 6 every Saturday, but I had many times around 20.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it can be basically a problem because the room is not big enough. And I have a few videos of us playing in the patio because it's not enough room for us. And also, I don't have 20 bassists.
Yeah,
but I have quite a few crap ones I've been collecting. But yes, it's a pretty rewarding time, and I look forward to keep doing it for sure.
Oh yeah. Hey, I was just talking. I did an interview with Barry Green and Jeff Bradisich jumped on, and it was about the Anna's Promise and all that's coming up, and you wrote the music for that.
Well, the Anna's Promise, it's just coming out.
Yeah.
Just in the process of writing it.
Okay.
I haven't finished yet.
That's one of the projects. And you did the previous one too, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Anna's Gift.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a pretty amazing experience. I had never written for a concert band before. And it was a world of discovery of the sound. When Barry told me about it, I was very skeptical because I knew concert bands, but I couldn't imagine a solo bass matching that. Yeah. And I ended up loving it very much. And I wouldn't hesitate to write for a concert band and bass again. It's just amazing.
It's a nice combination. There's some, I can't remember for the life of me who wrote, but there's some solo bass. It's like a play on Mozart. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a couple. Actually, I've seen a bass concerto written for concert band and bass.
Yeah.
Nick played, Nick Walker.
Uh-huh.
I'm pretty sure he did it. And it was a great piece. I mean, the colors of the concert band are just out of this world. I mean, a good concert band or wind band, it could be an amazing thing. Mm-hmm. And as a composer, it's like having a new palette. And now I'm writing for orchestra, and I feel like, why? Just I need more clarinets and I need more brass. It's a nice project, and I'm pretty amazed that so many people are jumping in. I still can't believe so many people wants to play it. It's a huge honor and brings me lots of inspiration because as a composer, what motivates me the most is the knowing that someone is going to play it, mm-hmm. that is going to sound. I cannot write in the abstract just for the pure joy of writing music. For me, I have to know this is going to sound. Otherwise, it's like having a son is not going to born, or it's not ever going to leave your home, So this is fascinating, and I'm enjoying the process of doing it, of course.
Nice. Yeah, it's like 34 performances or something like that lined up already. Barry was saying something like that.
Yes, I just, I would like not to think about it. I just
yeah, that's true.
right now, all I have to think is to get things done and communicate with the story and with the music, and then it's going out.
Yeah.
And to me, yesterday I was talking with a friend, and I was telling that I don't claim paternity over my work. I don't feel very attached to it. So when I'm in the process, somehow I try to forget about me and go with the music. I mean, flow in the process. And once it's done, it's out. It's like a catharsis, it's going out, and it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the people who wants to play it. So right now I'm in the process of taking things out and try to give them a nice shape, because not all the times go out in a good shape.
Yeah.
But during that process, I don't really want to know a lot about it. I'm just focusing. Of course, I have a premiere date, and I just have to focus on that thing. That it has to be done, and it's going to sound better. After that, well, it's going to be the reborn of the remake of the piece, because every time it gets played, it changed.
Yeah.
And it's like the previous one. I mean, even with the same person was playing the bass part, that was Barry. I believe almost every time it was played, it was different, and something small changed, because the piece is finding its own shape, and especially such a long piece, because it was a 50-something minute piece. So every time I found something, it's a little bit out of place, or could be a little bit better, or I don't know. For me, I have that image of the composer taking the score and shaking it, and all the small notes, leaving the pages, because those are more notes than you need. And so always, when I write something, at the end, I start taking notes out, which I feel like I will end up doing with the bass duo that Jeremy played last day.
Oh, yeah.
Too much notes.
They mentioned that at the performance.
I remember last year I played with Diego Secharies, a wonderful playing for him, and it was the first time we've met over the internet. On Facebook, we exchanged lots of messages, and we Skyped a couple times, and we said, okay, let's play something together at the ISB. So since this is my only bass duo, I said, okay, let's play this, and we got together. I remember when I sent a score to him, I got a few bad words from him, very, very, very fast. And then we got together, and he tells me, this is the last thing of yours I'm going to play, because it's so hard. And I was like, look, I promise you, I haven't done any harder than this. The other stuff is not as hard. I was young anyway. So it's just have fun with it, and then just forgot to practice so much. Just the music inside, hidden between all those notes.
Andrés, so great to chat with you. We might be doing a round 2 down in Mexico right now. I am not sure, but this is not the last you're going to hear from Andrés on the podcast. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. It's so cool to get into the mind of performers and composers and talk about how they work. I find that fascinating. I hope you do too. But I think it's really interesting, like Andrés, when he composes, where, how, and I learn so much that I can apply to my craft, be that bass playing, teaching, podcasting. I take lessons from each and every single one of these interviews I do, and I apply them to my own craft. AndresMartin.net is his site. It'll link up to everything. Beautiful website, by the way. And yeah, I have so many great episodes I have recorded recently. I just can't wait to share them. But I'm really excited actually taking a couple weeks and putting out some of the greatest hits of the podcast. You're going to be hearing the complete Winning the Audition series coming up here. I'm putting that all together into its own episode. Ron Carter's coming back on, archival episode from Ron Carter. Matthew McDonald of the Berlin Philharmonic. Bert Turetsky is going to be coming up in a little bit, and you're really going to enjoy, if you're listening to this as it comes out, you're really going to enjoy tomorrow's episode, my first ever Halloween episode with James Vanderbark. So stay tuned to that, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.